The strict scrutiny test is a demanding one, and most practices analyzed under it are declared unconstitutional. But not all of them. Let's take a look at the issue of affirmative action to see how the strict scrutiny test is applied in practice. In the 1960s, many people began to believe that merely moving the legal barriers to segregation was not enough to make up for the past and present effects of racism. African Americans and other minorities had been systemically disadvantaged in employment, in education, and even in health care, for decades. Civil rights advocates called for more aggressive action to address the effects of these inequalities. The most famous of these calls to action was delivered in 1965 by President Lyndon Johnson at a commencement speech at Howard University, the same university where Thurgood Marshall had attended law school. In the most famous passage, Johnson said,
"You do not take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bringing up to the starting line of a race, and then say, you are free to compete with all the others, and still justly believe that you have been completely fair. Thus, it is not enough just to open the gates of opportunity. All our citizens must have the ability to walk through those gates. And this is the next and the more profound stage of the battle for civil rights."
These programs came to be known as affirmative action. The only question was whether they were constitutional. The Supreme Court first addressed this question in the case of Regents of the University of California v. Bakke in 1978. This case involved admissions to the medical school at the University of California, Davis. Each year, the program admitted 100 students. In order to diversify its student body, it set aside 16 of those slots for non-white students. In other words, non-white students could compete for all 100 available slots, while white students could only compete for 84 of them. Alan Bakke was a white student who was denied admission to the program. After discovering that all 16 of the applicants admitted under the university's affirmative action program had lower test scores and a lower GPA than he did, he filed a lawsuit claiming that the policy violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. This case involved public discrimination and the 14th Amendment, because UC Davis is a state-run university. Most laws or practices that discriminate on the basis of race are designed to hurt racial minorities. Affirmative action is unusual, because it is an attempt to help them. But because affirmative action cases involve racial classifications, the strict scrutiny test is still used. The Supreme Court was sharply divided. Four liberal members of the court said that the program was justified in making up for the effects of past and present discrimination, and they voted to uphold the program. Four conservatives said that racial discrimination is wrong no matter who it helps, and they voted to strike down the program. In the middle was Justice Lewis Powell. Powell used the strict scrutiny test to analyze the university's admission program. In the strict scrutiny test, the first question the court must answer is whether the university has a compelling interest in its affirmative action program. The university said that it implemented the program to further the goals of integrating the medical profession and increasing the number of physicians willing to serve members of minority groups. The university also argued that students from diverse backgrounds bring diverse experiences to the classroom, enriching the educational experience for all. Powell agreed that these were indeed compelling governmental interests. He wrote, "Physicians serve a heterogeneous population. An otherwise qualified medical student with a particular background, whether it be ethnic, geographic, culturally advantaged or disadvantaged, may bring to a professional school of medicine experiences, outlooks, and ideas that enrich the training of its student body and better equip its graduates to render with understanding their vital service to humanity." So the university had passed the first part of the strict scrutiny test. But now Powell turned to the second part of the test, whether the university's program was narrowly tailored to achieve that interest. And Powell ruled that it was not. While agreeing that achieving racial diversity was a compelling interest, Powell said that the university's argument that this is the only effective means of serving the interest of diversity is seriously flawed. In effect, the decision to reserve 16 seats exclusively for non-white students created a numerical quota, guaranteeing that at least 16% of the students would be non-white. Powell said that other universities had proven that they could diversify their student bodies without resorting to quotas. Therefore, the UC Davis program was unconstitutional. So Powell agreed with the conservatives on that point. However, Powell also agreed with the liberals on another important point. While the conservatives argued that race could never be considered in the admissions decision, Powell agreed with the liberals that it could. While universities and governments generally cannot use racial quotas, they can use race as one factor among many when making admission and employment decisions. In other words, if a university used a multifaceted approach that considered multiple factors such as age, gender, professional background, place of residence, and so on, then race could be one of the factors that could be considered. Powell's opinion struck a middle ground. It prohibited the use of strict numerical racial quotas, but it permitted race to continue to be considered when making hiring, promotion, and admission decisions. And although the court has changed a lot since 1978, it has adopted Powell's approach consistently. On June 23, 2003, the Supreme Court decided two cases that clearly illustrate the difference. Both Gratz v. Bollinger and Grutter v. Bollinger involved university affirmative action programs designed to increase the diversity of the student body. The Supreme Court upheld one of these programs, while it struck down the other as unconstitutional. In Gratz v. Bollinger, the university evaluated applicants using a point system. Points were assigned for various categories, including their GPA, test scores, and personal essay. 100 points were needed for admission. 20 points were awarded to members of underrepresented groups. This was the highest number of points awarded in any category. Even a perfect SAT score only earned an applicant 12 points. While the court agreed that achieving racial diversity is a compelling governmental interest in the context of higher education, the university's program was not narrowly tailored to achieve that goal because it placed too much numerical weight on race. By contrast, the university in Grutter v. Bollinger used a holistic system that encouraged admission evaluators to consider a number of quantifiable factors, as well as a number of soft factors, which included race, along with many others. Because race was only one factor among many, the court upheld this program as being narrowly tailored. The Supreme Court has been consistent in its approach, but this is almost certainly going to change. After being closely divided between liberals and conservatives for several decades, conservatives finally gained total control of the court with the appointment of Amy Coney Barrett in 2020. In 2022, the court handed down a number of decisions that demonstrated the court is prepared to overturn liberal precedents it does not like. For example, it reversed Roe v. Wade and ended the constitutional right to abortion. Several conservatives on the court have already called for ending affirmative action altogether. For example, Justice Clarence Thomas disagrees that increasing diversity in higher education is even a compelling governmental interest. It is highly likely that the court will overturn Bakke and end affirmative action in 2023 or 2024.